The other great start was your compatriot, Fernando Alonso, from 11th.
There is no question that this is the start of the Grand Prix. I mean, it's the amount of corrections from the steering wheel that we can see even on a easy fast turn 2. And how he's always going for the gaps where there's no cars. It doesn't matter if then there's a wall in front of you or you're squeezed by a Force India or whoever. It's just Fernando at his best, you know. He's the best starter in Formula One that I've ever seen. I would say I would rank him above Max or Luis or whoever, because his sense of 360 degrees is unbelievable, and he can watch in every direction. He has a very quick eye correction, and if you look at his helmet, he's always correcting and looking in all angles. He's a fantastic starter. Yeah,
I think even now he's still really good. When I was racing him, I mean, I'd be wheel to wheel with him, especially at the race starts when everyone's around, and he's always going to be the guy to make places. This is even after the first corners, everyone's still in a bit of a melee. And you've got Nico Rosberg there on the inside, and he sweeps around him, sweeps around Paul di Resta as well, and he's still making places up on the first lap the whole way through. So he gets himself into a good place. Now, a few overtakes that get the race going for him. We should say this is the Pirelli era of Formula One now, and those that start in the top 10 had to start on a used tyre. That rule's come in, and Fernando qualified 11th. So he has a new set of tyres for the first stint, which possibly helps him, but he's got some decent overtakes, and he comes through. What I'm interested in, he always goes for the outside line. Have you noticed that with Fernando?
Yes, always, because he doesn't waste time. Basically, he's always, if you go in the inside, he will go on the outside, and if you keep to the left, he will go to the right. I mean, that's Fernando, because he will always throw the car where there's no cars and make sure that his braking is long, very long.
Even this one, there is even space to go up the inside, but he chooses to go for the racing line. But then this is against Nico Hülkenberg, and he just manages to throw the car in around the outside of him, and then has the inside for the next part.
Yes, I mean, what amazes me about Fernando is the fact that when he's overtaking and his car is so much on the limit that he's correcting and catching the rear end every time or locking the front. So there's two types of drivers, the drivers that know how to overtake and the ones that don't. And he knows, obviously, but he's very aggressive overtaking. So with Fernando, you know that he won't put the front wing and then you close the door and he will end up in tears. When he overtakes you, he throws the whole car in, and you know that there's no way you can close the door. And this is why he makes a lot of places, but in a safe way.
It's interesting, you don't see him get involved in many tangles where there's a nose in. You're absolutely right. This is the only one, I think in the whole race, that he actually went for a move on the inside, and guess who it's against? Pastor Maldonado. So maybe with this one, you don't want to be on the outside of Maldonado, possibly.
Well, I think that Fernando will choose the place where you leave the door open. So, and I don't think that he had double thoughts about if it's Maldonado or whoever. He has no respect for anyone.
Did you used to know
the track?
When you were racing, would you race differently depending on who was ahead or behind?
Absolutely. I mean, I've always had very clear who am I fighting against.
But even if, let's say, one driver is more aggressive than the other, would you be, if you were fighting a Maldonado or a Grosjean in this era, or just drivers that were always aggressive, or there's some drivers that are always less aggressive?
Yeah, I would always think about how they drive or how aggressive they are, but also what they are fighting against, or what is the risk to lose. You know, so if I was fighting against, like when I jumped into the car in McLaren, I knew that I was halfway through the season, the guys fighting for the World Championship, I'm not fighting for the World Championship, so I know I can risk a bit more because they won't close the door. But anyway, every driver has their own techniques.
Yeah, then so Fernando comes into the pits, and this is really the phase where he goes from the midfield and he comes out, and at the end of this, he's up in fourth place, or a net fourth place, because he comes out now ahead of Kimi Räikkönen and Kamui Kobayashi, who were both having really good races. But Kobayashi had a slow pit stop in the Sauber, and Räikkönen was basically jumped, I think, on the overcut here. and Alonso comes through. So he's already at this point up into sort of race-winning contention, albeit a good chunk away from Vettel. You've got Grosjean and Lewis Hamilton ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Fernando and the Ferrari, I would say, they in the Pirelli era, they were very good with the rear tires. So we don't know if it was because of their, the aero characteristic or the geometries or whatever. It's just the Pirelli tires suit the car very well. So when everyone was suffering from high deck, they were a lot better. So possibly also as well, it was the driver, the management of the driver. But Fernando and the Ferrari was very good when this type of conditions, Valencia, high deck, a lot of pit stops. It was the beginning of the Pirelli era. So. We were, when you arrived into Formula One, you were told the target tire temperature, front, rear, split, everything. We had no idea. And then when the Pirelli came into Formula One, we started playing with, we realized how sensitive they were to temperature and how important was to nurse the tires at some stages when they were new, or we were experimenting. And I think Ferrari and Fernando were always one step ahead in this respect. So that's one of the reasons why we will see a bit later on that he just overtakes. And then, for example, there is the cars, the Lotus of Kimi and Grosjean. They were also extremely good on the rear tires.
So important.
Why was that? Was the driver? Was more the car? Was the? I think it's mostly how the cars treated the tires.
It was the rear tires at this point, wasn't it? And especially this Valencia weekend, it was so hot. And there's this circuit, loads of traction zones as well.
It was so hot on that day as well. I remember. I mean, I drank all the liter and a half that I had after a few laps. It was very hot. It was also the effect of a bit that there's no air, like in Singapore, because you're going through the concrete walls. So it was a tough race physically.
Yeah, for those tyres as well, super tricky. So we got now Alonso, he's got a little bit more work to do, and this was a move that he put on Mark Webber, who we highlighted before, started near the back, tries to go on a one-stopper, so he's going long, and Alonso's had his pit stop, got fresher tyres. Look how close this one is.
Yeah. Webber, well, he's also a tough one, Webber?
Yeah.
Marky boy. He's a difficult one to overtake. But you are right, he's very, very close there.
The commitment on this one comes through.
Yeah.
And then I think he's a bit caught out here by how early that the Webber's braked, and he comes in so hot that he's not far away from running into the back of Bruno Senna. This one, after seeing this, I couldn't help but have a look back at old Marky Boy's crash as well from a couple of years earlier, because it almost was the same thing on a great day for Alonso. But this was one where Webber was caught out by the car ahead braking early.
It was Heikki, and Kovalainen, he was being lapped, I believe. He was lucky. But it's one of those things that, I mean, you remember in Australia when Fernando was behind Esteban Gutierrez and braking for turn 3, I think it was, that it was a kind of similar. You misjudge the position and the braking point because you just want to overtake.
Yeah.
And you don't really see that the guy in front has to brake at one point.
Yeah, that was a huge crash as well for Fernando, and that was my first Grand Prix in 2016, and Fernando went cartwheeling down there, red flag. But yeah, he got away with it on this occasion.
Yes, so it's one of those things that Fernando in this race took massive risks. In every overtaking maneuver he makes, it's nearly. But he didn't touch anyone.
Well, that was a look at just a small section of the 2012 European Grand Prix, but there was so much action through the whole field, some good, some bad. For more of it, check it out on F1 TV.